Welcome to the Inspiration Contagion podcast, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each episode spotlights and interviews one transformational leader, their stories, and their advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. If you are a visionary seeking to uplevel your leadership skills, then this is the podcast for you. I invite you today to spread inspiration like a contagion. Welcome to the Inspiration Contagion movement. All right, welcome to episode 50 of the Inspiration Contagion podcast. This week's episode is also being recorded for video, so if you would prefer to watch, please be sure to check out the show notes for the YouTube link. This week's guest is Michael Anthony. Michael was born in a hyper-abusive drug addict mother who cut his finger off at 4 years old, a stepfather you pray you never have, and a racist grandmother that pushed him into an identity crisis. By the time he was 9, his family was in poverty and often homeless, all while being members of the Mormon Church. At 12, he was adopted by his grandmother and quickly turned to drugs and alcohol to survive the continuing abuse. Despite multiple learning disabilities and not graduating high school on time, Michael found success in corporate America in his early 20s. However, success only made things worse. Michael found himself morbidly obese, high and drunk daily, and ultimately self-sabotaging everything around him. It was not until finding his inner power through his mirror moment and choosing to do whatever it took to work through childhood trauma that his life really began. Today, Michael Anthony is the author of the best-selling book, Think Unbroken, and is a coach, mentor, and educator for adult survivors of child abuse. Michael spends his time helping other survivors get out of the vortex to become the hero of their own story and take their lives back. Michael hosts the Michael Unbroken podcast, teaches at Think Unbroken Academy, and is on a mission to create change in the world. With that, welcome, Michael. Quite an introduction there.
Quite. I hear that and I go, yeah, I guess that's me.
Yeah, it's quite a story. So why don't you start by just sharing with our listeners a little bit more about your background and creating this Unbroken program?
Yeah, I'll give you the elevator pitch version. So, my mother was a drug addict and alcoholic. At 4, she cut off my right index finger. Stepfather, super hyper abusive. I'm biracial, black and white. My grandmother, super racist old white lady from a town in Tennessee you've never heard of, adopted me when I was 12, and you would think that would be a godsend, but in hindsight, it actually led me into this odd identity crisis. Did not graduate high school on time. In fact, got expelled, but then got put into a last chance program and then still didn't graduate high school on time. And found myself thinking about, what is the solution for poverty? How do you create change in your life when you come from nothing and feeling like at the time it must be money? And so I thought to myself, how do I become successful in corporate America? How do I navigate? Because that's the only place I knew how to get money legally, because illegally I was really good at that. I've been selling drugs since I was 12, breaking into houses, stealing cars, being in gangs, all kinds of bad stuff. But my friends were getting murdered. 3 of my childhood best friends murdered. My friends were going to prison, my family in prison, some for life, and looking at it and going, okay, this is not long-term viable. How do I navigate this? And getting really lucky and getting a management job at a Wendy's at 18 years old, making $26,000 a year, which at 18 years old might as well be $1 million. And then thinking about, that's not enough. That's not going to get me to where I want to be. And then chasing this idea of being in corporate America. And sure enough, by the time that I was 21, I got my first check for $10,000 and was on this path. Obviously, I spent every single penny of it at the mall that very day, but now I was in this position where money was just exacerbating the problems that I had in life. More food, more women, more drugs, more clothes, more cars, more, not recognizing that effectively I was just pushing down all of the bad things that had happened to me and trying to quote unquote get over it, because that's how I thought you manned up. That's how I thought you became a person. You just didn't let it impact you, while not simultaneously understanding that it was defining everything about me. Then when I was
Wow.
25, I was having this moment. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm like 350 pounds. I'm smoking a cigarette, and I might have been smoking a joint actually, eating chocolate cake and watching the CrossFit games. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing, man? Like, what is happening right now? And then like looking at my life and going, okay, something here is not right. The next day I like wake up and I'm super hungover and I go in the bathroom, like looking at this round fat face in the mirror. And I'm like, when I was 9, there was a moment that we were so poor. I literally had to steal water from our neighbor's spigot on the outside of their house. Imagine being so poor that in America, you don't have running water in your home. That is how poor we were. And in that moment, saying, no matter what, I'm not going to live this life. And then while not living that life because I had excess and all this, it was very much I'm living up to the expectations. Everyone said, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're too fat, you're too stupid, you're too this, and letting that narrative define me. And in that moment, I looked at it and said, from this moment forward, I'm going to do whatever it takes to have the life that I want to have. And then insert montage, 10 years effectively of just going hard every single day to build and create the life. And that was therapy, men's group therapy, AA, NA, CBT, EMDR, all of the acronyms, literally all of them. The only thing I didn't do was like electroshock therapy. And I contemplated it, trust me. And from that, it was very much like thinking about personal growth and recognizing that I used to like throw shade at people like Tony Robbins and Mel Robbins and Brendan Burchard. And then recognizing like the reason that I was not cool with them was because I wasn't okay with understanding that I wasn't always going to be the smartest person in the room. And then understanding that forced me into this personal growth journey where I really got deep into creating a life, right? Because effectively, I'd always been living the life to other people's expectations. This was the first time I was taking control. And then about 5 years ago, I started just creating content. I was putting out a blog, just sharing what I understood about the world. That was it. And then people were saying, oh my God, my experience was like this, or I relate to that. And for the first time ever, Holly, like I felt community, right? And imagine coming from nothing and then to feel that. And I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. I had no intention. I never thought I would be in this position, right? But it came from serendipity. And I think sometimes the universe puts something out in front of you and you just got to shut the fuck up and listen. And that's what this was for me. Can I just shut up and step into it? And slowly it transformed into Think Unbroken, and then into coaching, and then into writing a book, even though I have about 1 billion learning disabilities and had straight F's in English in high school, and like pushing myself into challenging the narrative of possibility. And then here I am sitting with you.
Wow, that's quite a journey. And I think it's a couple things. One, it's pretty incredible that at 9, you made the choice that this is not viable and you committed to designing your life intentionally. I feel like a lot of people in this world wouldn't even think about that as a possibility or an option, especially at the young age of 9. So that's pretty incredible. And then, two, I love how you mentioned serendipity and shutting up and just doing it. This is, I think, the difference between people that might feel inspiration but don't take action on it, right? So they'll get that idea, the light bulb from the universe, this amazing thing will come to them, and yet they don't really take action, or their mind or their thought process is so loud, or they're numbing out, like you were describing all the things you went to numb out and not deal with the pain that you were experiencing.
Yeah.
And so they can't hear it, right? So it's pretty incredible that you ended up where you are. So kudos to you.
Well, you know, two things. One, at 9, the only thing I understood then was something's not right here, and this isn't the life that I want, right? What I didn't understand was like all the implications of the traumatic experiences, right? And if you are familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey, it's a question, it's 10 questions, and my answer is 10. I answered all of them. I'm fucking A+ student in trauma. And then looking at the way that impacted my life as an adult, not recognizing like, man, these anonymous hookups and drinking myself to sleep every night and eating chocolate cake for breakfast, which is real, and I fucking love chocolate cake, is very much like informed by that. The dissociation, the being in this outer body experience, effectively like watching my life from third party. And I'll say this because I think it's really, really important. I'm not an anomaly. I'm not somehow special. I'm super lazy and I am contemptuous and I don't care about most of the world or life or anything in between, but I made a choice, right? And so much about life is, can you stand up for yourself to yourself, right? Because you're so spot on. It's in this head, it's in this mind, it's in the way that we perceive ourselves in the world. And effectively I had to rebuild. And I think most people do. And like sitting here, this conversation, this Michael in front of you, and all the people that are listening, like I am a caricature of the idea of the person that I wanted to be when I made a declaration to myself that I was going to create the life that I wanted to have. And everything that I know about life to this point is, can I continue to move forward no matter what? Knowing two things. One, on a long enough timeline, I will die. And two, on that pathway, am I willing to see what happens? I think so often we get scared of possibility. We get scared of the idea that maybe we could actually have that thing that we want to have. God, that's fucking terrifying, right? Because then you have to start living into the expectations of the reality that you create, as opposed to the expectations laid upon you from the external world. And in that, I understood something really important. The only way that I was ever going to do anything of value with my life was to compare myself to myself. It's just like in writing. This is a you versus you adventure.
Yeah, that's a really good reminder for people. It's, with social media and whatnot, it's easy to compare ourselves to others, but the ultimate comparison is where we are today versus where we want to be tomorrow and how much we're growing in that moment, because ultimately we are defining success on our own terms. And when we allow other people to do that for us, we're genuinely going to be unhappy because it's not our path. It's not meant to be our way forward. So, one of the questions I always like to ask everyone is, what makes you such an inspirational leader, or what's your secret sauce, Michael?
Um, I think it's twofold. One is I had to sit and look at and establish values. And I think one of the huge missteps that people make, regardless of whether you're in a healing journey or a personal growth journey or just like living life, is you haven't yet created your values. And that is this pillar of understanding of who you are in the world. And for me, one of my values is leadership. That's actually like, it's honesty, leadership, kindness, self-actualization. And then there's a fifth one, it ebb and flows depending on how I feel that day. But the four there are really cornerstones, right? And so looking at that and accepting, here's the reality. Like, if I wanted to step into this thing fully, I acknowledge the fact that I'm going to have to do it. Like, that's it. That's the part of it. And I don't think there's a secret sauce here, right? I make missteps every single day, but the beautiful part about falling back is they're beautiful data points, right? And you can look at that and go, oh, okay, I made that mistake here. I've learned something. Let's not continue to do that. The thing that differentiates me versus the old me, or many people who are like stuck, is that I there's no excuses, right? I live my life by a very simple motto: no excuses, just results. And that means to me, like, what are you willing to do? Because I had to ask myself, all right, you're 350 pounds, you're smoking nonstop, you're cheating on your partners, you have no self-esteem, no self-belief, you've never fucking shown up for yourself one time in your life. What are you going to do about it? Right. And that was what kind of triggered this. And then later, years later, because I think you have to really deploy patience in all of this, was, how do I create a framework of boundaries that actually dictate my life? And that means getting up at 6 a.m. and going to the gym and journaling and writing and eating well and not smoking cigarettes and not cheating and not lying and not. There's a lot of things that I don't do that allow me to do the things that I do. I fucking hate saying that. And the thing is, like, I think about this journey in life, and what it really comes down to is you have to make a declaration to yourself. And when you do so, ask yourself, are you willing to actually see it through? Are you going to stop letting yourself down? Because guess what? This is the hard part. And I'm going to break everybody's heart. Nobody fucking cares about you. I'm sorry. Like, if that's the truth, not in a like your family or friends or community, but whether or not you're successful, like, that's not anybody else's job. And the people that you pass in the street, they have their own life. I mean, even your own family and your friends, like they have their own things. So are you going to stand up for yourself? Are you going to be willing to go through the drudges of understanding capability and possibility? And that's what it's about. Like, partly, and I want to be very clear about this, doing it compassionately and without shame and without guilt, because you are going to fuck up. Like, period. I fuck up every single day. There's no way that you're not. Sorry, forget about it if you think it's not going to happen. You are every day. More importantly, can you not like destroy yourself over it? Because guess what? It doesn't matter. Keep moving forward. Now, if you repeat same behavior patterns and you're not interrupting it, you might have a different conversation that needs to be had. But overall, the only secret that I know that I want to share that would impact anyone at all is do it. That's it. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think recently I had this conversation with someone around how if you're doing life right, it's kind of a lot of work, but it's good. Like it's worthy work. But like you said, it's really personal responsibility around creating those boundaries, having those rituals that you need to continue to grow that day. And like you just said, also being compassionate with yourself. So for me at least, when I'm catching negative old patterns, that's progress. Or I make a mistake but I'm like, oh, I know why I did that and here's what I'm going to do next time. Like that's progress. Like you said, you're still having those missteps, you're still making those mistakes, but at least you're recognizing the pattern, you're recognizing the mistake, and you're pivoting. So I think that's really great advice, is to take that action, stop comparing yourself to others, and just you know celebrate the progress that you're making, acknowledge that. So I also wanted to ask you, what does inspiration mean to you?
It varies, right? It's going to be different on day to day because I I don't know how to say this without it's going to come off odd. I don't really ever get inspired. And what I mean by that is it's just I have a catalyst of a moment that happens in my life and I just make a decision, I just go for it till either I'm not interested in it anymore or it doesn't work. Right. I think about inspiration and motivation, they kind of live in the same boat. There's always going to be a catalyst. If I wanted to, I could get every person listening right now so fired up they'd go run a marathon. But that doesn't matter, because if you have to do it again tomorrow, are you going to? Right. I think the biggest thing is it's okay to be inspired. It's okay to be motivated. If that's what you need as a jump off point, go with it. Right. I mean, I think about it too. Like sometimes I'm in the gym and I just have to put on the workout playlist. 99.9% of the time, I'm listening to podcasts or books. But sometimes at 0.1%, I go, I need that fired up playlist. Let's go. And then I'm back in it. Right. And if you need that, run with it. But I think the best thing that you can do is just leverage continuity. Like that to me is far more important than inspiration, because you can always find inspiration. You can always get excited. You can go search YouTube for David Goggins right now and you'd be like, what am I doing with my life? Right. Or go listen to a Brene Brown TED talk or whatever that thing is. It all exists there. Right. It's about continuity. That's the difference, right? That's what fires me up is, can I force myself to do this every single day, especially and more importantly on the days that I don't want to.
I like that. So being finding your catalyst and then having that continuous flame that's burning so that you're being consistent versus just being inspired and then, maybe working towards that marathon goal, for example, for 5 or 6 days and then not, continuing to do that. There is a difference, I think, between just that momentary inspiration and figuring out, digging deep and staying motivated. And I think like for you, what I'm hearing is that you know what your long-term goal is. You've built that community, you're following your calling, you have these boundaries and these things to keep you on track and compare against yourself for progress. And so that gives you that continuity and that gives you that consistent inspiration or whatever you want to call that. So I like that.
Yeah, but it didn't always used to be like that. And continuity at one point was like, can I just get out of bed today? Can I just actually go to work? Can I go to work for 5 days in a row? Can I not drink myself to sleep for 2 days in a row? You know what I mean? It's like continuity is, an inspiration. Think about this, right? And I don't know if you've ever smoked or if you know anyone who smokes, but smoking, they always say, is the hardest thing you will ever do. Why? Because you've allowed yourself an out. You go, okay, I'll quit tomorrow. I'll do it next week. Let me finish this pack. One more cigarette. And I battled with it for years. I didn't even start smoking until I was like 21. And then at 28, that's a long time. It's a stupid amount of time to be killing yourself daily. If you smoke, quit. You go figure that out. But the thing about that was like being in that moment, the thing that leveraged me stepping over the boundary into actually being done is I said, I'm done. I made a choice. This is all about choice. And what people don't understand is that making a choice is hard. It's hard. And then sticking to it is even more difficult. And arguably, it's really easy to be like a day in it, 3 days into it. Get to a year, get to 5 years, get to 30 years of creating and building this thing. And on a long enough timeline, you can have everything that you want. Now, I'm not going to say you're going to be a billionaire or put a car in outer space like Elon Musk, probably improbable. But what you can do is, can you be a great friend, partner, brother, mother, sister, friend, lover, like all of the things? And most importantly, can you look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I am good with the reflection on the other side? Don't think that for 1 second possibility will elude you. The only thing in your way is you.
I like that. For people listening, you might want to take some of that medicine and look in the mirror and see if you're happy with what you're seeing. And if you're not, make a different choice and stick to that new commitment. Like he just said, not just for 21 days to create the new habit, but years. It really is a year over year commitment. That's beautiful. So, Michael, I also wanted to ask you, how do you define success for yourself today? And how did you arrive at this definition?
Yeah, so it really started to change when I changed the way that I think about words. And as a child, I buried myself in reading. And I mean, I have a PhD in probably like 19 things at this point in my life because I just love reading, always nonfiction. Just how could I learn and grow and adapt and understand the world in a different way? But one of the things I never understood is like all of the things I was consuming weren't ever then transmuted into an understanding that became palatable on the long term, right? Because I hadn't redefined the impact that those things had in my life. Now that sounds convoluted, so let me break it down a little bit more simply. The understanding that I have about the power of words is that they dictate everything that happens in your life. If you think about words like can't, don't, shouldn't, won't, those are automatically pre-qualifiers for you not being able to step up. It's so easy to leverage those as an out. I can't be healthy. I can't have a good partner. I can't. Well, no shit. Because here's the thing. We are the stories that we tell ourselves. And so if you are ingraining and embedding this idea as the software that runs the hardware, which is your body and your action in that, it's never going to come to fruition, right? That's what I didn't understand until I got deep into this journey. And when I understood that, what I needed to do was reevaluate my relationship with words at a singular level, not even like not a dictionary perspective, but like looking at words like possibility and can't and shouldn't and hope and love and compassion and success. And here's the thing. In my life, I've been incredibly successful many times over in very different avenues, all dictated by other people's definition of what that word should mean. And then when I sat in it and I looked at my life, I go, what is the definition of success in your life right now? Which is always changing because I think it's like a living, breathing thing. Success came into I didn't smoke today. I didn't cheat on my girlfriend today. I didn't get drunk today. I didn't hit my brother in the face today. I didn't do whatever that thing was today, right? Do it tomorrow. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Fail. Good. I learned something. Do it again. And then it turned into looking at success on a high enough scale. Everything that I do now is intertwined with my 30-year goal, right? And what that means for me is, can I put myself out of business? Meaning, can I make an impact great enough that I am obsolete? Because at the end of the day, two things. One, I didn't sign up for this job, nor do I necessarily want to do it. But two, just like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And so for me, I look at the fact that we live in a society where it's socially acceptable to beat the shit out of your kid, but if you hit a dog, you're going to prison. I don't think either are okay, but the point being is, how can that exist in the nomenclature of Western society in this year that we live? My goal is, how do we create impact great enough that we can interrupt the flow of generational trauma so that I can go, I don't have anything to do today. And until that moment, which I have come to the understanding will never happen in my lifetime, right? But that doesn't mean it won't happen 200 years from now because of the work that we're doing together. Even this conversation creates change, right? And so success for me is between now and the moment I die, which is inevitable because you are going to die. Can I do everything in my power to move towards that goal? And that's success, right? It's the self-defined narrative, because I've understood that in my life, that word success is defined by this narrative.
Yeah, and I love how you explained that you were successful in terms of how other people define success. And I think that this happens to a lot of people. They allow their parents' definition of success, a teacher, a mentor, a guide, even a coach sometimes define success for them. And that's extremely dangerous, because only each of us can define what that means for ourselves. Like you were saying earlier, setting values for yourself. It's also equally important to define success on your own terms. And I agree, it's a living, breathing thing, because we're not ever the same person we were the day before, the moment before, the hour before this moment. And so I think it's really important to be hyper aware of how you're defining success and how you're measuring up against your own definition of success. So thank you for sharing that. Now, you've shared several challenges and obstacles that you've experienced along your journey to success today, which is ongoing. Can you share some of the big challenges and obstacles that you faced?
I think it's everything. I mean, nothing about life is easy. Nothing about your existence, Holly, as a human being has been easy. And I think the number one thing we can come to recognize is that it's always gonna be hard. It's always going to be a challenge. It's always going to be, how do you show up for yourself? And I would say the number one, like, if I did, to answer your question and to be fair, because sometimes I think you can be high level and not really ever answer shit, and that bothers me, and I want to answer this. And so the one thing that I think I know more so than anything was like garnering a sense of self-esteem. And I recognize at 27 years old, I had zero. And of course, I mean, look at my background. Of course, I had none. And so, how do you do that? How do you build that? The hardest challenge, again, as I said, it's you versus you. And understanding that, it was like, okay, well, what do you have to do to build that thing to the place where you can put your feet on the ground every day and be like, I'm happy with the person that I am. The most important thing that I ever think about is like, am I good? Am I good with who I am? And if I'm not, then I need to pause, take inventory, and figure out what's going on so I can get back to that place. Excuse me. And that was a battle. Getting comfortable with the fact that it's okay to be you is incredibly difficult. And until you get there, that is the battle. That's the hardest one, because everyone wants to say you're not good enough, you're not capable, you're not strong enough. And then that's the narrative running through your own head. That's in that place I call the vortex, where you're just like stuck. And how do you get out? Well, you have to build yourself. You have to create yourself, right? The introduction to the last part of my book is titled Create You, because that's what this process is. And I had to step into that by doing really hard, arduous, and uncomfortable things, like talking about feelings and emotions and experiences, and going to the gym and doing what I said I was going to do. Because here's the thing, like, to go from 0 to 1 is way more difficult than going from 1 to 100, right? And so that's what it was about. Like, can I look at the understanding of my life and say, yeah, I don't feel good about me, and do something about it?
Yeah, and I think if we unpack that create you moment too, similar to defining success for ourselves, there's a lot of things to fix and to heal from. Like you shared the things that people said to you during childhood trauma that became part of your belief system, because that's what happens to us when we're little. The way and the things people say to us, they become part of our belief system and our identity. So as adults, when we start to heal this and start to try to break through these patterns and these negative habits and, up level these beliefs that are really not true, you have to go through all those feelings, those emotions, that trauma, unpack those beliefs to actually create who you want to be. Because up until then, you're allowing other people and their thoughts about you, who you are, and even your identity from childhood is oftentimes created by so many people around us. So it's actually quite empowering, but like you said, very scary, very vulnerable, very raw. You almost feel kind of naked to some degree when you go through that and creating yourself.
Yeah, and then there's also the part that I don't think is talked about enough, and that's the continuation of self-sabotage in that. Because the old part of you, what everyone will call, and I myself included, call like that shadow self, like that always wants to bring you back in because it's way easier. You're used to it. You like this feels normative. Okay, yeah, I hate myself. I hate the world. Everyone's against me. Blah 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 blah. Right? That's really easy to be in. And then when you start like doing the work and creating the change and going forward, and you're faced with self sabotage and these behaviors that are negative thought patterns and all the things that exist, that's that 0 to 1. You go, okay, I got to keep just trying, right? Create a new baseline, create a new baseline. And I think it's also really important to state that, I think about plateaus a lot, right? Not as in plateau, i.e., this is as far as you're going to go, but i.e., this is a new baseline. And now you have a new plateau that you move towards, understanding that once you reach that new baseline, it doesn't negate any of your previous experience. Like that's one of the things I want people to think about here. So often people go, oh, I fell off, so it negates everything I've done. I'm worthless. I'm not good enough, whatever. Everyone was right. Fuck everyone. What are you going to do? If your new baseline is the understanding that you made it 6 days without getting high, great. Now you have to do 7. You failed. You had a fallback. You look at that. That becomes a data point. You go, this thing happened that led me to being triggered, that put me in a position to do this. Okay, great. Now I made it 7 days and 37 and whatever that number is. It's not even drugs. It's everything. It's everything that we do. And then understanding that within that, you just look at it and you go, okay, I'm measuring, just like we've talked about, myself versus myself. And yes, I failed, but I have a data point. That does not make me a failure. That just means I'm still trying to solve for X.
Yeah, I like how earlier when we were talking that you mentioned your failures as beautiful data points. And I want to mention that again, repeat that for people listening, because our failures, if you really reframe them, can be viewed as beautiful data points. It's just like, okay, well, that didn't quite work out. What's the next step to get me to, like you just said, that next plateau, that next baseline? And it's a progression. Like there's no way you're going to do all these changes, especially this deep inner work around belief and identity and creating you to the point where you are good with yourself when you look at yourself in the mirror. That takes a lot of failure. It takes a lot of repeat, retrial, experimentation, and it's never done. That's the reality. Like you can look in the mirror and you can get to a place where you're happy with where you are, but then it's like, okay, what's the next thing? Because you're just constantly peeling back the layers of the onion. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, 100%. I think about this too, like well beyond a decade into this journey, writing a best-selling book, coaching around the world, speaking with you today, all the things I've done, still battle every single day, every day. It doesn't end. But that's the choice that I make. And there's freedom in that. You go, okay, cool. Let's keep going.
Love that. Yeah. So it's all about the choice we make every day, every moment for those that are listening. So, Michael, you identified as a storyteller leader. We've heard a lot of stories already so far, great examples. So, can you explain to me why and how using storytelling is so important to you as a coach and in your business?
Yeah, well, if you think about it, like how do we relate to each other? It's through shared experience. And like growing up, the stories that I would read, and I mean, and even today, like I'll probably read 50 books this year. I'm probably on pace for that. And I'm just always consumed with stories because it helps me understand the world better. And the same reason I love film is because you can dive into that and you can create a perceptual understanding of something perhaps in a different way. And I think that the greatest thing that we have is, and it's not even just stories, right? I think it's twofold. One, I do believe that we have an inherent responsibility to share our understanding of the world with each other, because in a communal sense, that's how we grow. And then two, as a part of that social responsibility is, in that sharing, it's about being willing to step into your own vulnerability, because in that nakedness, right, in that place of being a little bit scared and distraught within your own choice, you actually are probably helping someone, right? And now this, I'm going to be very clear. I don't think you have to share darkness to help people, right? I share my story because that is something that's predicated within the understanding that I've put those things on the shelf where they need to be. I can say this 50 times a day and it's not going to interrupt me. That didn't used to be the case. So you have to like be in that place. But as far as storytelling, if you're willing to step into creating something compelling, maybe somebody will listen. And to me, that's really interesting to me, because as a kid, I wrote all the time. I wrote my first book when I was 9 years old. It was a vampire love story comedy. And like my mom was a crazy Mormon person, so she threw it away. But like, I was like, I love stories. It's true. I never told that on a podcast before, actually. And so like, I've always been a storyteller, and I think it's my narrative.
I'm just like still giggling. I was not expecting that. All right. Well, that's really fascinating. We went from like 52 not, nonfiction books to my first story that I wrote was about vampires.
Yeah. Well, and that happened because I know I just had watched From Dawn to Dusk, which children should not watch, and I was like, "Ooh, I have this idea." So,
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. So back to the actual the question we were talking about in storytelling. I think there's so much power, even when you were listing off all of the EBT and all the programs that you did to heal. I find that a lot of the most healing therapeutic programs happen in circles, right? So they happen by hearing stories about others, seeing empathy. It's really hard to go through, for example, a step study without having accountability from people that are going through some kind of addictive behavior or something that they're struggling with as well. It allows us to feel human in a space with other people that are also human, and feel safe and okay in that vulnerability and in that authenticity. So I think there's so much value in being vulnerable, like you said, once you're in a place where you've healed that issue, and sharing that, because we live in such a world where people only share the good. They're not, it's very unlikely, it's like 5% or less of the stories on social media are real stories of transformation and struggle.
yeah, yeah, it's true, and I think that's unfortunate. And I think it's also misleading. And one of the things that I try to do is I try to keep it real. And so sometimes on my social, you'll see these pictures of me drunk with a wig on at a party at 3 o'clock in the morning and cigarette in my hand, because, and then I'll pair that with where I am now, because like, it's true. Like, those are real experiences. I talk about the drugs and the women and the clothes and the money and all of these bad parts of my experience, because those were true. And we relate to those, and people beat themselves up over their own experiences. But guess what? There's like 8 billion people on planet Earth. Chances are someone else has done the same stupid shit you've done.
Yeah, and to layer onto that, when we talk about self-acceptance and looking at the mirror and being okay with 100% of you, that includes the shadow self. That includes the stuff you messed up on, all those mistakes, those failures, the things you were embarrassed or shamed about. If you can't embrace every aspect of you, you haven't finished the work. You haven't gotten to that next baseline.
Yeah, and when I think about mistakes often, like, again, it's just constant failure in my life all the time, and I've come to be okay with that. And those mistakes particularly, I think, were actually necessary, because without those, I would not be the person I am right now. And I think about all of the missteps that I've had. We are the sum total of all of our experiences leading up into this moment, and because of that, that defines who we are. But that doesn't mean that going forward, it has to continue to define us. And that's what I want people to think about. Like, you could take a sword and just slice down the middle of this moment and go, from here, I'm making a choice to not relive those experiences.
Yeah, and that is powerful, and it's while that's a choice, like you said, choices are not easy, and that choice in particular, I think, is very hard for people. But it is true. You can just take all of the good, the beautiful, the love from your past and choose to stop experiencing the trauma, the negative, the shameful things, that the mistakes, the failures from your past. Take the lessons you learn from it and let go of the rest of it. But letting go is hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, there is choice in it, right? And I don't think you can choose just to not be impacted by trauma. That'll never happen. But you can make the choice to do the work to move through it.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great distinction. Yeah. There are, I think, some things you can do to energetically pull back from the experience of the trauma. And like you said, the continual commitment to release the trauma, because it's an ongoing, daily, almost forgiveness practice, healing practice that you have to continually do to really get to the next level. It's beautiful. So another question I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the key transformational stories that you've heard maybe from other leaders or mentors that were really profoundly impactful on you?
Um, that's actually a really great question. So many people come to mind. I'm impacted by so many people in the world. It feels odd to choose just one, but I would say, and this might come off as odd because I don't know that people really ever talk about her, but there's a UFC fighter, Ultimate Fighting Championship fighter, named Rose Namajunas, and Rose was bullied constantly as a child and picked on, and she was small, and she was, hurt a lot by people who were supposed to protect her, and like me being a person from a very abusive background who found this love and passion in this calling of fighting. And in this moment leading up to a championship fight, which is almost impossible that it'll happen in most fighters' careers, the Friday before, and again, serendipity, she's my favorite fighter, one of my favorite people. I happen to be in Denver where she lives, heading to the airport as she's we're crossing paths. And I just look at her, I go, "You're going to win this weekend." And she looked at me, she goes, "I know." And I was like, that's a really beautiful moment. And she was like, "Thank you." And all odds were against her. The person she was fighting, this woman, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, was like the best, undefeated. There's no way that this person, Rose, is possibly going to win. And yet, when the lights were on and she was in that moment, she showed up. And not only did she win, she had knocked her opponent out, this person who had never been defeated in decades. And it was a beautiful moment. And the thing that she said that was so beautiful, and the reason this comes to mind is at the end, when she's interviewed talking about the fight, she just goes, "The one thing I want us to do is be nice to each other. Can we stop bullying each other?" And I was like, that's one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. I'm like getting emotional thinking about it. Um, because it's about like taking that experience and finding a way through it no matter what. And that's what it's about. That's what life is, like, just going for it, because you never know, on the backside of all the hard shit and all the naysayers and everyone who says you're never gonna do it, you might become the champion.
Yeah, that story gave me chills, so I could feel what you were feeling. The beauty in that story is twofold. I love that she had such belief and faith in herself that she just knew that it was going to happen, which I think is what we need to succeed in hitting how we define success in our lives. And then also, I just love that she tied it to her why, her why she's on this planet and the cause that she wanted to help transform in this world. And when she was interviewed, brought it back to that, because I'm sure that's a huge part of why she had so much inner knowing and faith for why she would win. So thank you for sharing that. That's great. Love that. I was also hoping you could share one specific example about how you use stories to teach, mentor, or coach.
Ooh, another great question. Again, I think that's about creating connection. One of the most fascinating things that I've discovered in coaching and with the people I've worked with from all walks of life, from athletes and celebrities to, regular people who have regular jobs who will never have any kind of spotlight. They all have one thing in common, and that is that they're wanting to change. There's something that they want to create that's different. And in that, what is so interesting is the juxtaposition of whatever it is that they have experienced or are moving towards in life. There seems to always be this little bit of an intersection where I can sit and go, okay, this isn't exactly your experience and I will never understand it because I'm not you. But this is what I noticed. And this is what happened when I went down this pathway. And I'm parlaying that against the one thing, again, coming back to what we're talking about, the power of storytelling and community and connection through that. I think it's very much like we used to sit around fires and eat and talk and experience each other. That's what happens very often in coaching. The difference is that my parlay with my clients is about relaying that story in a way that helps create not only a new framework of understanding, which is really important, but more importantly, on the backside of that, we then create a game plan to work ourselves through it, right? And so it's much more in depth than simply a story. But speaking of catalysts, that's what ignites the fire for the change.
Yeah, I really do agree that stories create that catalyst and that reframe so that people actually have the perspective, the willingness, the openness to trust you enough to start building that plan for that transformation. So thank you for sharing that example.
Yeah, of course.
So Michael, this has been great. This is a wonderful interview. So many great stories, examples. We're going to dive into the lightning round if you're ready.
Let's do it.
What is your favorite book? And I know this is hard because you read a lot.
No, it's easy. It's The Truth by Neil Strauss.
Great. What networking or community group do you love most?
Instagram.
Okay.
You wouldn't think of that, but I love the people there.
Yeah, no, that works. That's great. I haven't had that answer yet, so it's unique. What is the best piece of advice you would share with others today?
I'll share the same piece of advice that became life-changing for me. 18 years old, not graduating high school. My teacher, Mr. Bush, who failed me, said something really important. You can't get by in life on your charms and your good looks. You're going to have to do some work.
Oh, I love that. That's a great message. And if you could share one message, not a piece of advice, one message with the world, what would that be?
Simple. Though trauma may be your foundation, it is not your future.
I love that. That's really profound. And my last question, what's the legacy you wish to leave behind?
That I left it all on the table.
Powerful words, Michael. Love it. This has been great. So Michael has been really generous. He's offering all of the listeners and anybody who's watching on YouTube a free gift. He has a free copy of his paperback book called Think Unbroken: Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma. You can check that out at www.thinkunbroken.com/free book. I will also have a link to that in the show notes. You can also follow Michael on social. I will have links for that, including Instagram, his favorite community. Anything else you would like to add, Michael?
No, it's just a blast. Thank you for having me here. Oh, I would say this. I also have a podcast called the Michael Unbroken Podcast, where I have the reverse of this. So please check that out.
Love it. It's great to have duality in the universe. So check out that podcast and be sure to follow Michael. With that, listeners, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. So how can inspiration contagion help you today? There are 3 ways. Number 1, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on the podcast listener of your choice so that you get newly released weekly interviews with transformational leaders from all around the world. They're going to provide practical, actionable tips for you that you can take and implement today. Number 2, if you have a burning problem or you're having some challenges, but you're not really sure where to start, so go ahead and visit hollyjeanjackson.com/events and find an event online that suits your needs so you can begin exploring and learning more today. Number 3, if you have a specific issue or challenge you're facing today, a burning issue that you need to resolve right now. Perhaps you're trying to build your guilt-free business. Perhaps you're trying to build an online product, or you're facing some challenges with technology in your business. You're trying to scale to that next level. Regardless of what the challenge is, go to hollyjeanjackson.com and then visit the services section and schedule an appointment. I'd love to offer my listeners a complimentary coaching call so we can figure out and get to the bottom of your problem and explore if coaching is a good fit for you. Those are the 3 ways Inspiration Contagion can help you today. Remember, nothing changes without action, so be sure to take action today. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. What is one thing you can do in this moment that will inspire someone? Without action, nothing changes. Be the change you wish to see in the world. If this show truly inspired you, we ask that you share it through your network. Help us spread the light and inspiration in the world. I look forward to seeing you here next week.